you might come back to me and say, Max, I gave a client a selection sheet and they took 2 weeks to get their shit together. I'm like, I know, bro. That is why we do it pre-construction, because imagine having that headache during construction. When you're trying to move the project forward, you're moving the project forward, but every day that goes by, that product is going to be 6 weeks before it gets delivered, and we're already 3 weeks into construction, and I've got an 8-week completion date. Well, you're just blown through your completion date. How old are you going to be before you start to experience life like you want it? I want to tell you right now, whether you like it or not, there is a better way to do business. Hi everyone, welcome to the Business for Builders podcast. My name's Max Peterson. I'm your host. I'm also the CEO at Smith & Sons Remodeling Experts. And today I want to give you some more value, some things you can take away and really implement straight away. There's nothing worse than sort of spending 5 minutes or 10 minutes listening to somebody, and then at the back end you think, well, I'll never get that 10 minutes back again. So I don't want that to be the case today. Before we get started, bit of housekeeping: like and subscribe, tick the bell, share this information with someone who you think might benefit, and be sure to leave us a few comments. And like I said, you can shoot me an email, max@businessforbuilders.ca, or you can go to businessforbuilders.ca and you can hit me up there. Go to that contact form. That'll end up in my inbox, in my phone. So look, let's get cracking. Today, we really want to give you some practical steps and some understanding. Life is all about education. Warren Buffett says the more you learn, the more you earn. And so, what I really want to do personally is always be developing. I might have made reference to this maybe on the TikTok Q&A last week that, we've started, we've sort of looked at, or we have engaged with Grant Cardone in Florida there as far as his sales training courses and some of the information that he shares with us, because there's no point in reinventing the wheel. And so, for me, I'm always going in search of new information, new technologies, new styles of doing business, new ways of selling, psychological breakthroughs where there might be some limiting thoughts or some, factors in my own life where I need to break some things down or build some things up or really improve, how I go about, running my day-to-day business. And so today, what I want to do for you is, you might have the phone ringing, you might not have the phone ringing. I would urge you that if your phone isn't ringing, you obviously got to look at what you're doing in the way of marketing and, really trying to attract inquiry. But you also, what you can do in the meantime is really double down on your systems and have a think about what it is and how you go about doing business. And so today I'm going to give you a bit of a breakdown, a little bit of an overview, and I haven't got a lot of time to do this. I mean, we spend all day, day 3 with our franchise general contractors when they first come into Smith & Sons talking about going, estimating. And here I am going to drop some stuff on you in probably less than 30 minutes about how to do, estimates and how to, put together pricing and things like that. So hopefully this helps you out big time and gives you a starting point. I would definitely not say this is comprehensive. It is by no stretch exhaustive. And really, I think what, after having been in the business now for 34 years, I guess this year, 1989, June 1989, I think is when I got into construction for real as an apprentice. So it's been quite some time, but what I've found is that, you're always tweaking, you're always creating efficiencies, you're always trying to, maximize the ROI on your time spent. And so, what I want to do is I'm going to break this into 2 parts, or I'm going to introduce Estimating 101 with the quote process overview. So just to give you a little bit of framework, I guess, around what it takes to go from sort of go to whoa, the initial phone call through to, let's say, proposal of your quote. Really it comes down to sort of 7 real quick steps. And then within that, steps 2 to 5 is where I'm going to start talking about the actual estimating component. So to get started, you're initially going to receive the inquiry and you're really going to want to have qualified the client, right? So, we have, the problem is you're going to go out there and get inquiries and people are going, can you give me a quote? And you're going to run off and do the work, and you've never checked if they've, got the right idea as far as what the project might cost. You haven't built the rapport, so therefore you can't really nail down what their budget is, et cetera, et cetera. And then you maybe don't even know what, we refer to as maybe tripwires or things within our dialogue with clients that really helps us identify clients who we believe have got potential. And so, one of those things is, we certainly we don't demand that we get paid to quote, and that's obviously a term that I don't use. But we offer a service and we package value, or we package value into putting together a fixed price quote. So look, I don't know that this won't help guys that do cost plus contracts, but it certainly might give you a little bit of insight into a process where I do fixed price quotes. That's what my guys do. And then you might consider jumping ship if you've got your own points of contention around, what happens to you in the cost plus project. And more often than not, the trouble you're going to have is going to be mid-construction selections. This is in cost plus, and then getting your final payment, because all of a sudden clients think it's up for debate, which it's not, which it shouldn't be. I guess in cost plus it potentially can be, but for us, having a fixed price building contract with a payment schedule built into said contract, it really does remove any of the kind of grey area or the debate. Having tripwires and ways to go about qualifying it and presenting value in the quoting process is what we do. So point number 2 in the process, you've got to go do the meeting. Let's say the client is qualified. You're going to need bid documentation. So you're going to need pictures and photos and concept drawings and any information. Now, I'm talking about a basement remodel, right? So really, it's super easy. You draw 1,000 square foot rectangle and you start, basically mapping that out roughly. And you might do it by hand there, which is not going to be to scale, but then you'll get back to your office and you'll use some estimating, you'll use some drafting software that you might have to do that. Alternatively, you can use, I think it's Magic Plan. You can actually do a bit of a layout using your phone, they're pretty gnarly. Some of my guys use Magic Plan. And then, of course, you're going to need to create a selection sheet. Again, if you're doing fixed price or whether you're doing cost plus, I think this still resonates with both operators. You're going to need to because you need to get an idea of the make and the model and the style and the color and the texture and the quality and everything that the client really wants as it relates to items that have aesthetic value that only they can select. So that's why we have a selection sheet. Then we go into the quantity takeoff, where we're basically trying to put together what it is that we need. Which really then, we move into the pricing aspect. Point number 5, pricing. So rates and quotes is what we use. You might be able to get a lot of your materials sorted out on rates because you can jump on a Home Depot website, but then you might need quotes from, say, electricians and plumbers, etc. And you might need, drywallers to give us a labour-only quote because we're going to supply the drywall, the mud and the tape, and you're just going to have a mutter and taper and a boarder come in and do the work. So it's all about pricing. And then point number 6, obviously the proposal you want to basically complete and present. And that proposal point is kind of broken into those two. It's where you really want to complete the proposal and be confident that you've got everything, all the boxes ticked. And then, of course, your presentation is ready to go. And then, of course, once you've delivered the proposal, obviously the proposal follow-up and close. So there's 7 points. It's an overview of the whole process as we would do it, really quick. And remember, this is 101. And then basically what we're talking about going into now is points 2 to 5. So we're talking about bid docs, selection sheet, quantity takeoff, and the pricing. So got some notes here. I'm going to try and keep it organized and keep it relatively short. I don't want to sort of bore you for too long. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm not going to give it to you as this is how you should do it. I'm just going to give you tips. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got 5 tips for you today. So I'm going to assume to set the framework that you're going to use a job management or estimating software. We use BuildExact. I would say that most softwares are going to have some degree of, complication or some degree of, trouble, in and around how you go about using it. I don't think any software is perfect. And BuildExact seems to be, for us, is just like a big spreadsheet on steroids. So it's what we use. So what I'm going to do, the second condition, I guess, to what I'm going to tell you right now, after using a job management or estimating software, is that you're going to build an estimate line by line. Okay, I'm not going to get into things like templates, recipes, or assemblies. Okay, they are what maybe I might classify those as advanced. And sure, if you jump on YouTube, there's going to be some guy or girl banging on about how to construct recipes or how to build, estimating templates or how to, put together assemblies within, in the way that you price. And so what I'm going to do is, like I said, 101, I'm going to start with everything is going to be category by category, line item by line item. So there is no leverageability in this process. what I'm trying to do is develop a technique. So when I had a quick question offline, from one of our TikTok audience here, which we are on live as we speak, what's the biggest project that you've ever estimated? And for me, or built, it was a $1.1 million project for an investor. And when I was thinking about, and I did this with a buddy, he was a carpenter, he was a buddy of mine, and he worked for me on the tools, and he come and worked as an estimator. And so him and I, we worked on it, and we always thought, well, all we have to do is build this project in our head, make sure that we compartmentalize or segment, create segments within the build process, and that will help us make sure that we really break it down to the micro detail to ensure that we don't miss anything. So, line by line, category by category is how I'm going to approach this quick chat with you guys. And I think then from that, depending on your skill set, you might be able to fast forward and get straight into, building recipes and building assemblies and really creating some really, cool templates, which really save you time. What you've got to understand is the challenge with that. So you can build recipes, templates, and assemblies, and they will give you leverage and they will speed up the process. But I'm telling you, the exponential negative impact, if those assemblies, templates, and recipes are wrong, that it can be devastating financially. So be careful. That's all I would say. Yep. It's like fire, can keep you warm, but it also can burn your freaking house down. So just be very, very patient in your learning, in your approach. It's not really in the estimating process. You need to be thorough and accurate over speed. But what you'd like to do is be, thorough and accurate and prompt and quick in your estimating process too, because none of us like spending any more time behind that damn computer than we have to. So here we go. Look, tip number 1, everything must be supplied, delivered, and installed. And I can hear everyone saying, or I can hear some folks saying, oh, there's Captain Obvious again. You know what? It's just, I'm going back. Remember, this is 101. Now, if you've just started out and you're mid-20s and you're like, hey, I've never really got cracking on estimating projects because I've always operated as a contracting, subcontractor carpenter, then, this would be a bit of an epiphany to you. But if you've been around the game for a while like I have, it'd be like, dude, I'm not listening to this fella. But either way, everything that it's going to take to complete this basement renovation needs to be supplied, delivered, and installed, right? So that is a tip. Think about, and I've gone so far as to talk to my guys about, let's say, we were talking, drywall, or we're talking lumber, whatever the case may be. Somebody has to order it and pay for it. Somebody has to deliver it, and then somebody has to install it. Now, you can do a one-line item where you might supply and install lumber. Now, to me, there's a conflict because they're two separate scopes of work. One is a supply and one is an installation. Plus, we've got to allow delivery. So I personally subscribe to being very micro. Now, because I'm very micro, it takes me a long time to build an estimate, which is why then we go into templates, line items, and assemblies, because I'm very micro, I'm very scientific in my approach. So when I'm setting up a template, I'm very diligent in my assessment of those line items and categories, and of course the recipes and the assemblies. So if attention to detail. If you struggle with maintaining attention to detail, then you're going to struggle in the estimating world, period. And so, you probably need to just up your game a little bit in that regard. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but you probably need to put your big boy pants on and educate yourself, because there's a whole bunch of reasons why you're not making money in this game or why you're losing money. And odds on, it's got a lot to do with you. And I know that's a little bit of tough love, but you can win as well, right? You've just got to maybe change your approach. And of course, it's, January. So it's a great time to sort of do a bit of reflection and think about what you did well and what you didn't do well. And maybe some of those things that you didn't do so well, we need to improve on. Okay. Tip number 2. You need to think about how you're going to understand your own estimate. So for me personally, I like to build it in categories, and then obviously I will go top to toe. So whether I was doing a 5-plex development for an investor, I'm still going to run a very similar approach as what I would on this, $80,000 basement renovation. So I am going to go back and start. Now I'm going to estimate, because we do what we call a quantity takeoff service, a lot of the planning and permitting and any of the engineering or the other design services that we might require usually are taken care of in that pre-construction phase. But in any event where we have to wait till we go to contract before we get permitting from city, then obviously I'm going to include that in this estimate. So you might, there might be some preliminaries. You might have a preliminary category where you have to put in there permitting, and with that permitting, you might allow for things like inspections, right? So every time that inspector comes out, they're going to ding you $250 or whatever the case might be for that inspection. So you need to make sure that in those preliminaries within that category, you might say there's got to be, there has to be rough-in inspection, there has to be a finish, whatever the inspections might be. Or you might choose to put them in order of appearance. So down further, maybe at rough-in stage, pre-drywall and insulation, and then, of course, at finishing stage, you might do that. So always think about how and this is why I can't say to you categorically, this is how you should do it, because before you got to me, you've already been building for X amount of time. So you've already got processes that you actually rely on subconsciously, and that might be in conflict with what I'm preaching right now. So just have a bit of a flexible attitude around what I'm saying, and know that you can manipulate and finesse this to how you think is going to work for you. Okay, so what I would do in using the categories, this is where you could use a template. But if you're just getting started, you might be able to put together a checklist more so than a template. And just to make sure that you go, okay, in the preliminary section, this is what I want to include. And then furthermore, as you get through that checklist, you're going to add the categories that are relevant. So for us in Build Exact, we have a template that's built. And when we want to build a new estimate, what we can do is we can actually just tick all of the boxes from this macro template that we have, and we can just drag across what it is or tick the boxes, and it'll actually introduce those into the new estimate that we want to do. So there is a time saver there. We're all about that. And then once we've built that list of categories, whether you've done that using a template or whether you've done that using a checklist or you've just done it out of your head, you've built it in your mind, you want to make sure that the categories are in order of construction. For me, I always get asked, what about if I do it area by area? To me, last time I checked, if I did a basement remodel, the drywall is not going to come out and do the drywall in the kitchen and then nick off and come back and do the bedroom. It's going to be, I guess because of my new home background, my new home building and construction background, we do it in stages. So if we're going to do all the foundations and the footings and the slabs, we're going to do all that first. And then we're going to do all the framing and then roof on, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, even when I'm in the renovation side of things, like case in point, if we were doing a bathroom, or whether we're going to do the basement here, for me, electrical and plumbing, which is what you don't necessarily see in new construction, I would do a decommission and make safe before I go into demolition. And so now in some cases, if that's just a bathroom, then I'm going to go and do the plumbing decommission. Potentially, I'm going to turn the water off. I'm going to disconnect the tap sets and the sinks, et cetera, the waste and water, and I'm going to then, move ahead with the demolition. But at the end of the day, I've got to cover the labor to have those plumbing items decommissioned, whether that's me or the plumber. Of course, I'm maybe a little bit cheaper than the plumber, but odds on is that someone has to actually do that work. So this is where I have a very micro, very scientific approach to every aspect of construction, and having done it for the longest time, nothing much has changed in the 3 decades or more that I've been involved in the game. So, you want to make sure that your categories are in line, and that you can then process the build process in your mind. It correlates with what you see on your screen. Tip number 4, you want to add items to the category. So what I've got to do now, and this is where we would start, thinking about adding assemblies or recipes and things like that. So it really does reduce the amount of time that I've got to spend typing, right? Because that's where, a lot of the screaming at me comes from my guys. They get tired of, typing in the same, supply drywall or deliver drywall and install drywall and the mudding and taping. Like it's so repetitive, no matter whether you're doing a bathroom or a basement. There is a lot of similarities in the verbiage and the estimating that we do. This is where that as you develop of confidence, I suppose, in your ability to really look at a project and estimate or build the categories, and then obviously the line items, the better you get at assessing projects, and the sooner you can move to a leverageability using some of those other features, let's say in Build Exact, like that we have access to. So, some of those line items, keep in mind, side note, I mentioned in the introduction that we've got, we're going to give the clients a selection sheet, which is, for a basement, it is what I like about, using a basement for this exercise is that it comes with, a kitchenette and a bathroom and maybe 1 or 2 bedrooms and a main area. So there might be some, media components that we've got to build into our electrical plans and things like that. And so it's a really good cross section. But what it means is that basement selection sheet is going to comprise of a lot of items in all of those areas, i.e. the kitchen and the bathroom and obviously the main living areas and bedrooms, and then some of the extra alternative parts, like media considerations, surround sound, anything like that. So when I'm building the line items in my estimate, as I'm building them, I'm saying, well, okay, I'm going to need this XYZ product or whatnot. And then what I'm going to do is, but I know that that's going to have to be confirmed by the client before I can actually provide a fixed price quote. So that would automatically, there's a box that we would tick to say, I would like to add this to our selection sheet. So as I'm building the estimate in order of construction in my mind, I'm also going a couple of things to consider. What is it that I need to specify? And there's some items that I can add to my specifications by ticking another box that don't need to be confirmed by the client. But more often than not, there's things where I'm going to add to the selection sheet, which they're going to have to confirm before I can actually price those and add those into my estimate as a specification item. So there's some things where I want to include in the specifications where I'm bringing to the attention of the client that line item, which may not be that you're going to have a matte black, vanity basin tap, such and such a style, such and such a model number, but it might be something that I want to specify the location, of the front door or whatever that we're doing. So there's no real aesthetic value to it, but I need to specify, where we're up to in that, as it relates to that part of the project. So understand that as you're building the estimate, you should be thinking about building the selection sheet as well. So depending on what your software does, and if you're doing, if you're using Excel, then obviously, which I don't recommend, but if that's all you've got, that's all you've got. What I would do is I'd have a separate page, I'd make another tab in that spreadsheet for selection items, and I would basically type that into my estimate, and then I would cut and paste that verbiage, and I would put that in the selection sheet on the next page. So that's what we need to do. And then, of course, when I'm done with all those selections and I'm going, right, everything with aesthetic value that the client needs to choose is now on my selection sheet. I need to do this fairly quickly because I need to get that to the client and instruct them that they need to confirm with me exactly what style and color and make and model and everything that they want to enable me or to allow me or to give me the information I need to go to my suppliers and my vendors and my subcontractors to confirm the price. Okay, so there's a little bit of stuff now that's at play. And this, what you'll find is you'll go, well, you might come back to me and say, Max, I gave a client a selection sheet and they took 2 weeks to get their shit together. I'm like, I know, bro. That is why we do it pre-construction, because imagine having that headache during construction. When you're trying to move the project forward, you're moving the project forward, but every day that goes by, that product is going to be 6 weeks before it gets delivered, and we're already 3 weeks into construction, and I've got an 8-week completion date. Well, you've just blown through your completion date. So, there is a matter of urgency. So before it gets out of control and the emotions get, too high during construction, this is why we want to do it pre-construction. So that's just my 2 bobs worth. Okay, so you've put together a fairly generic list of categories, items. You've identified what you can specify off your own understanding, but you've also been able to build the selection sheet, which is then when it comes back and you can actually get the right item, you can then actually add that into your estimate as a specified item, and you want that line item to go in your specifications. Now, what we do, side note, in our specifications, we're able to upload pictures of said product. So, our specification sheet for a basement could end up being maybe 15 pages. And of course, clients, if they read that there's a certain type of tap set down there, that kind of is a little bit of mumbo jumbo. But when they see the picture, and of course, the bottom of every page on our specifications, there's a spot for an initial. And so every selection or every specified item that's going to be included in the project has a picture, and it's very quick for the clients to be able to go, oh, that's exactly what I was thinking. That's exactly that's what I wanted. That's what I wanted. Oh, hang on, Max. No, you've got the pink one. I need the orange one. Like, that's kind of what we're looking for as we're going through the proposal. And of course, the proposal is certainly another podcast because it's very micro and it's not a 5-minute job. Okay. So the way we go about now pricing. So we've got our estimate in a tentative or a draft format. We've got the selection sheet back from the clients. It's fully completed. We can now import that data and add that data into our estimate, into our line items. Now what we have to do is start to get pricing from subs and suppliers. Now, you can do this a couple of ways. I don't subscribe to one or the other. I kind of like to use, in some cases, I know rates and I know roughly budget numbers that I'm very confident with. But then in other cases, I've actually got to run to the subcontractor and get an actual quotation from the sub. And then, of course, anything that I'm not sure of as far as the pricing goes, it's kind of to be determined by the supplier. I've got to reach out to that supplier and say, look, I need a quote for this, this vanity cabinet or whatever the case may be. So it's a mixture of the rates that I might have had access to from historical data and from experience. And then there's other times where I actually need to go and get hard and fast quotes. Obviously, the trick with quotes is you've got to be very wary of the expiry dates on quote. If you get a quote today and you don't, and it's got 30 days it expires and you don't present your quotation or your proposal to the client for, 6 weeks, then you're vulnerable. So please be aware of that. Understand the urgent nature of it. And if you have to, and you're really pushing the limit on the time as far as an expiry, you're better off going back to the supplier and saying, look, can you just revisit this for me? Can you re-quote it? If everything's the same, I just need a newly dated quote so that I can, when I go to contract or when I go and present the proposal and I get an agreement in principle and I get a contract with this client, I can then turn around and we can nail that down. So please be mindful of the vulnerability that you can experience by quoting today and starting the job in 5 months. I'm telling you, that is one of the dangers or one of the considerations that we have at Fixed Price. But we do have contingencies and we do have processes built into that. I'm not going to talk about it today. We're here talking about, how do we go about estimating. So you got to understand too with suppliers, particularly vendors and subcontractors. I've had it both. It's all care but no responsibility. In other words, if I go and get a framing kit ordered, wall frames and flooring and floor joist systems and trusses, and they miss 150 studs, guess what? They're like, too bad, so sad. We're sorry about that. We took care, but we don't take responsibility for the cock-up. Okay, so that's on you, the builder. So there's a part of me that really has to look at some of those quantities that I actually do get back from any vendor that gives me a quote, and I still have to double check them to make sure that their numbers are right. Understand that most people that do quotes for you from Home Depot or your plumbing supplies company, they just work a job. They're not. There's no urgency to get the numbers right. Their neck is not in the noose. The box is not under their feet, and so all they want to do is keep their job. And if they make an error on your quote, well, they're probably not going to lose their job over it, but it'll cost you profit. So always be super wary. And I guess it comes down to try and get the best people, but at the end of the day, you don't trust anybody because you're the last line of defense in your biz. So. That's about rates and quotes. Now, a question I get asked, bit of a side note, is a lot about, the whole markup situation. I chatted with a guy last week and he really, he's very, very much just starting out in the game and he really had no idea on, what percentage markup that he would apply to anything. So, what I'm going to say to you today is that you need to, I think for this basement project, which would be an $80,000 project, you need to be making a 30% profit margin. That's what I would recommend. Now, you can do whatever you want to do. If you cost plus, you're only going to be marking up, 12, 15, 18, 20% maximum probably. Our markup is probably double that. But we always work around a profit margin minimum at 30%. In some cases, I've heard some recommendations from other entities that, your profit margin now don't confuse markup and margin, your profit margin on renovations should be as much as 35%. What I'm talking to you today is more conservative than that. We're talking about a 30% profit margin. Understand just on that that markup is the activity, margin is the result. That's how I describe it, nice and quick. So whatever you do on the way up is the activity, that is the markup, and the margin is what you've created. It is the result of whatever it is that you've applied. So whether you apply, a 30% markup, well, that's going to be more like a 25% profit margin. But like I said, we work on a 30% profit margin, so we're more into the 40s, if you know what I mean. Now, so that's sort of, you're at a position now, really, once you've got all of that response from, following up subs and suppliers, about quotes is super difficult. From within our job management software, our estimating software, we can actually do what we call, almost call it a QTS. It's actually an RFQ, a request for quotation. So if we've got all of the plans and documentation and some of the specified items in there, we can actually attach that to an email from within our software and dispatch that. And then that will actually be monitored inside of that estimate, inside the job management software. So, I remember, once upon a time where I recall vividly opening 20 emails. So compose or open, compose. And I had this, this screen full of 20 open, and I would literally just grab the PDF of the plans and add it there. And then I'd have to add the subcontractor or the supplier I was wanting a quote from. And then I'd have to type in the same verbiage to do with his scope of work that I wanted quoted, send, right, next. And it's brutal if you're doing it that way. And this is where, the tools and systems that we use today is what gives us leverage, and leverage gives you lifestyle. So you need to think about that. Does it cost money? Absolutely. But you got to pay to play. I don't care whether it's marketing and advertising. I don't care whether it's coaching or mentoring, and I don't care whether it's estimating. Every one of those things is going to cost you money. But what you've got to start thinking about is, what is the return on my investment, and what if I don't do it? What ground am I going to cover by apparently saving that money, as opposed to maybe investing that time and money? And what is going to be the ROI? How much more will I be able to learn as an operator? How fast will I be able to develop a business, as opposed to doing it, let's call it the caveman way? And so, super important that you understand that if you are wanting to make money, a lot of that comes down to speed and efficiency as well as delivery. Okay. Final thing here is the quote finalization. This is where, I remember when we did present the quote to our investor for this $1.1 million townhouse development, there was fear and trepidation. It was a time where we sat there and we thought, okay, we've got to have this face-to-face with Grace. That was her name. She was an Asian investor. And, we really had to basically get to a point where we were ready to commit to, based on the work that we had done in the last 28 days. And it was 28 days from the initial phone call that I chatted with her to the agreement in principle on the phone. And it was a Wednesday night at about 9:15. We were still in the office and having a few beers and just thinking about what might happen. And, I think prior to the presentation, you do have to arm doors and cross-check, for a making a bit of a comparison to what happens pre-takeoff with the stewards and the hostesses on an airplane. They want to lock those doors, and then they want to cross-check each other's work. And so I think there is a cross-checking process. I have just subscribed to, and I've outlined to you how much detail goes in to creating an estimate. But there is a part of me, because I come from old school, that will actually go and do a square foot analysis and just see, where we're at, because I've got to understand what my competitors are doing. And a lot of my competitors are just running square foot rates. And so what I'm doing in that regard, I'm not going to do that cross-check using a square foot rate to pull my price down. What I'm doing is I'm using that square foot rate to understand what the client is going to see from one of my competitors, if there is another competitor. Because a lot of the time, our clients are paying us to provide them a quantity takeoff service, which means that we're not actually quoting against anybody else. I know you might find that hard to believe, but that is generally what happens. If there is a transaction, there's an exchange of value. We're going to deliver a quantity takeoff service, and they're going to pay us to be able to provide that, which really does give them not just a price, but it gives them peace of mind and security, because they know what it's going to cost, they know how long it's going to take, and they know what they're going to get. And so super important. So a lot of that cross-checking that I do is not because I'm trying to be the cheapest. If you think that being the cheapest is your way to make money in this industry, you will lose. Quoting on price is a race. Trying to win jobs on price is a race to the bottom. You will hang yourself off the back of that because you will get a lot of work. You won't be able to pay good guys to do it. You'll be so far in deep with multiple projects. You're going to find yourself overwhelmed with obligation, and you know who's going to end up fixing that? You are. So you're going to have 3 or 4 projects on the go, and you're basically going to have to fix them all yourself, do them all yourself, because you haven't got enough in the budget to be able to sort of have good people working for you. So keep that in mind as well. So, look, I think, an overview. Tip number 1, everything must be supplied, delivered, installed. Tip number 2, add the categories and confirm those categories are actually in order of construction. Maybe use an estimating checklist that you have developed that you continually refine based on your experience and as it grows. Tip number 3, you want to add items to each category, some of which will be used in the creation of your selection sheet. That's super important. Tip number 4, pricing. It's a mixture. It's a hybrid. It's between rates and rates from subs and suppliers, and also quotes from subs and suppliers. And understand all care and no responsibility from those guys. Always make sure that you've got your appropriate amount of profit margin percentage. And side note, you want to make sure that your fixed expenses are, let's say, 15% of your revenue. So if you're doing $1 million, 15% of $1 million is what you should be spending on your fixed expenses. If you're spending any more than that, your business is going to have a hard time supporting itself. So that was just a side note. Tip number 5, in the quote finalization process, you want to make sure that you have ticked all the boxes. And this is why having that estimating checklist is going to help you. A quick story to complete or to finish. I talked about having, my buddy being my estimator, and we were both probably learning. That was in 2010, I think, or 11. And we were both probably using our carpentry skills that we had, and we were trying to estimate this thing. And 3 weeks after we got into this $1.1 million contract, Jace came to me cap in hand and sort of said to me, hey, look, I've been trying to, and, we're at foundation stage or footing and slab stage. And he's already ordering ceramic tiles. He's making sure in advance that we've got stuff ordered. And of course, he came to me cap in hand and he said, look, Max, I've failed to include all the ceramic tiles for 5 townhouses and the walkways in this contract. So unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, we spent the remainder of that project looking at ways to claw back. And so, this is why you've really got to be meticulous in your approach, because once you're under contract, once you're in construction, really going back to the clients is not an option. You are the construction practitioner and professional. You should assume the risk. The flip side is that you should be allowing cushions and contingencies within your estimates for said blowouts. Now, I'm not saying you put cushions and contingencies in there to make up for your incompetence. I'm saying in some cases there's an unknown quantity, especially in the renovation game. You really might need to add a 5 or 7% cushion in a certain line item. And in some cases back in early COVID days, we were adding 15 to 20% on lumber line items because of the fluctuation in the price. I mean, we could quote something today and by the end of the week, the lumber's gone up 10%. It's like, what? And so, there was those kinds of considerations that we had to make. So, look, I hope that helps. I hope it really nails down in your mind a bit more of a process, and understand this, that you don't just wake up and I'm a good estimator. We all are continually getting better, and a lot of it's got to do, building technologies, and of course, business operation technologies, and then of course your own ability to learn and really take on some advice, perhaps like this. And it's really just a buffet. You take what you want and you implement what you think you can, and then it's really, the growing process is half the fun. So, hope that helps. Be sure to check us out on YouTube, Business for Builders YouTube. Hit me up on email if you've got a question, max@businessforbuilders.ca, or go to businessforbuilders.ca. Hit me up in the contact form. That'll end up in my phone. And be sure to hit us up with any questions you've got or comments. We'd love to hear from you. Go build a kick-ass business. We'll see you on the next episode. Cheers.